Hey everyone, I'm Clue. Welcome back to Small Star Dungeon 2. So I'm here on the Warrior Dimension because we're going to do a bit of testing today. So I want to see how fast these comps are in relation to, say, using warps or the thief cancelling the chest animation, and just try out a few different comps to actually gauge how quickly we can clear and get a better idea of how much free time I have to grind in our 10-hour challenge run for all dimensions. So I've gone ahead and switched everything in the oddity shop off. That speeds up the run, so like, you know, both death animations, the treasure trasher, anything that just speeds up the run normally and is more endgame, you know, things we don't actually have access to. And the first comp I want to try is the traditional comp, so this would be what I would like to use normally. So we've got our mystics, nurse, and then 3 carpenters, and ideally the carpenters would be using nailed it, so I don't know if I actually did that on the script. So we've got test 1, I don't think I did nailed it, no. I did strongest single target attack. We'll do one more. Enemy, because ideally if we were using carpenters, we just have them always use nailed it. And we do have the magic clock going, so we do understand, you know, this is the pace for the run post Dimension 2. We'll make sure everyone has that. So test 1, perfect, nurse, yep, mystic, and of course thief is the other class I'm using. Yeah, so the 3 tests I'm going to do are this comp, and then probably one where I sub out the carpenters for mystics again, and then one that's the same, but the mystics will be casting. So I do want to gauge how quickly each run. I'll only be doing an hour, so till we get the green, and that way I can see how much warps contribute and the actual floor per hour, and I can compare all the runs and then use that to calculate how long it would take to clear the 5,400 floors of all dimensions. So, don't need to worry, save keys, we've got warping sets, and I guess we're just starting from 1. So we are clearing in 1 strike. That's probably the only other factor I can't sort of change, because obviously in the actual run we won't always have the damage to clear, but it should be a good base estimate for time. Okay, floor 1, everything should be good to go. Just watch it for a little bit, make sure, so recharge. Perfect, the nurse should heal if we have to take damage, and then if the carpenters get a turn, they will use nailed it. On the 3 enemy room, should be coming up, probably, yeah, the next one, 8. So I just want to make sure everything's good, and then we'll leave it for an hour. Yeah, okay. So we can gauge the floor per hours, and then use that to calculate. Hopefully I think we want to aim for around 1,500, should be the right pace. We'll have to see how warping contributes as well. We're already taking some from the boss animation, but I do believe the thieves are speeding up the chest animations quite substantially. I might have to do another run without the thief, just to gauge it. I know it is quicker, but I would like to see the difference, whether or not it's worth, because it is losing a spot for experience, so to speak, so there's some merit to running it, some merit to not. It depends on how much. We're already dipping down though. Anyway, I'm gonna let it run for an hour, and then we'll come back and do the next test. Right, so that's the first test done. So without warping, it's about 1,200, and then with warping, it is 1,300. So that means warping's about a 10% bump in speed, which is definitely good to know. It's something I didn't originally account for, but it will have a huge impact. So now using this baseline average, I can actually figure out, you know, how much time the run will realistically take, because this is a viable comp that I should use. Granted, it doesn't factor in, you know, multiple attacks on enemies, but I think if I were to use carpenters, I wouldn't have to. I would always be able to reach the damage thresholds just because of how much damage now it does, even though it's slower on the initial form, but I should be able to just swap in at Dimension 6, like I previously planned. But anyway, we won't get into the explanations too much. We'll just move on to our other tests so we can get all our numbers down, and then I can run the calculations, and then we can sort of go through it. So next up, we are testing out AoE clearing. So we're using a 1 nurse, 5 mystic, and still a thief. The thief to actually just skip the chest animations, because it does make a really decent impact. So it is something I need to start adapting. So the script, I'm AoEing on greater than 1 enemy room, so 2 enemy, 3 enemy, and 4 enemy rooms. I'm not sure if this is going to be quicker than just AoEing on 3 or 4 enemy rooms. I do think AoEing is going to actually be quicker than striking, simply because it stacks the death animations together, which is something I didn't really account for before, and I just used the animation speeds on the wikis, so striking is significantly quicker than casting Torment, but we'll see. We're also still using group heal. I might want to swap that to use first aid to test it, because for the majority of the run I'd be using first aid. I wouldn't be able to get the nurses to 25 till about halfway. But group heal is obviously the goal, since it is significantly quicker. Either way, all this testing is just to reach a baseline. Okay, so we're already seeing a huge jump in the FPH, so being able to cast and clear is significantly quicker than using Nailed It. So even with the increased damage, I mean, to be honest, they're somewhat comparable, because on a 4 enemy room, you're doing more damage through Torment, because you're hitting all 4 enemies per 1 action, rather than Nailed It hitting 1 enemy per 1 action. So I do think I want to sort of transition back to using Mystics. It does make the run a lot more complicated, because there is no good way to level up the nurses in this situation, and without group heal, I can't really just run 4 Mystics, because of the thief. But anyway, what was it? It's about 1400 without warps, 15, 25. So it's a sizable increase over the Carpenters. We will just tweak it a little bit, so I want to try still using the AoE clearing, but I want to make it 3 and 4 enemy rooms, so not the 2 enemy rooms, and just see if it's quicker or slower. It might, honestly, I do expect this to still be quicker, just because it does compress all the death animations together, and that is a really big impact on the run. Like, I thought that the attack animations were this significant portion, but it's all the idle animations that really sort of rack up the time. So I will just use the same comp. We'll just switch over to my test 3 script, which is Team Alive greater than 2, easy peasy, and we'll see how it goes. Right, so at a glance, it looks to be quicker, though I have a feeling without the warps, because again, I can't control warps, it's going to be anywhere. It could be a huge increase if you get really lucky, but it's going to be around 10% each time. So let's see, what is it? So yeah, it's actually slower. It's 1365. I think it was about 1380 on the previous run. I mean, they're really comparable, so it's tough to say. It's probably just more consistent to run it without. You know what? Actually, there's one thing I haven't factored in. So if I'm striking on the 2 enemy rooms, I'm triggering the recharge clause. So that's actually going to make it significantly slower. So I might have to play around with that and see what the difference is. Either way, it definitely seems like Torment is still viable, more viable than what I was thinking, because at 1500, you know, it's not going to take too long to clear. Right, so there's just one more test for me to run. It's just basic striking to get the proper baseline of the run. Doesn't really matter what comp I take. I'll stick with the same setup. But I'm not going to bother healing. I'm not going to bother using recharge either. I just want to see what the maximum sort of time save is if I were to just be able to hit through everything and not take any damage. Granted, this will never happen because I will never be able to reach the attack thresholds to be able to clear perfectly like I can obviously with this test. We just swap over to test 4, perfect. And again, all the script is just strike. There's nothing else to it. Right, there we are. It just is an ore, default attack. Still warping, still using the thief to crack the chests. But we'll see. We'll see how long this takes. And what the FPH ends up as. Should be fairly quick. Again, I think we're sort of over my initial estimate anyway. We'll go through the math anyway in a second. Wow, I gotta say, that's actually intriguing. Actually, the FPH without warps is technically higher, but not significantly either. And remember, I'm not using recharge and I'm not healing, so I think I'm right to actually just cast on enemy rooms. So it must mean that the death animations do take a toll, which is good to know. Anyway, we've got all the numbers now, so we can do the math, and we can actually see how long the run should theoretically take. Right, so I've jotted everything down. We've got the FPH and then the FPH minus warps. So using Nailed It, Torment on 1+ enemy rooms, Torment on 2+ enemy rooms, and then just striking. So all in all, these three are very close. That I sort of just think it's independent almost. Like it doesn't matter which option I go with, it'll end up being around the same speed. But we can go ahead and we can start calculating how long the run should take. So with a magic clock, because that's obviously what we're done here, there's 5,500 floors for us to clear if we were to do all of them perfectly. So if we just drag it down, we can see that if we were to use a nailed it comp, it should take us roughly around 5 hours at most. If we were to use Torment, 4 hours, and then similar with both the other Torment branch and striking. So all in all, this is actually a really good hypothetical, because my understanding or my initial impression was that the run was going to take 6 hours, and that was using the basis of it was around my normal clear time was 1 minute per every 10 floors, so it's what, 550 in minutes, and then you divide it by hours, gets you roughly 10 hours. But it appears that I was incorrect, both through warping and then using Nailed It, we're significantly quicker. We're 2 hours in front of the pace I was trying to keep. So this means I can actually invest a lot more time in sort of grinding and in making sure I can hit damage thresholds to actually meet this speed. Because that's the most important thing is, although this is the fastest possible time, in most scenarios I won't actually have the damage to clear. It will sort of I guess, bell curve. So in the initial worlds, I won't have the damage to clear the early floors, but then once we say get to Dimension 3, I can now do the first 200 floors at optimal speed. It will just be those end floors where I don't have the damage. But it means I can invest more time in scaling up damage in order to actually meet that threshold. The other things that I sort of want to look at is, for one, this is taking Dimension 1 and 2 out of the mix. So it's only a slight tweak. So this is 3 hours and say 20 minutes to maybe 4 hours. So again, it's not a huge time save, but it does mean I can allot myself pretty comfortably 6 hours to actually grind, which I thought taking 3 hours to do Dimension 1 was sort of a bad habit, but it almost looks like I could possibly grind out both the Mystics and Nurses to 25 and then progress the run and use, a Torment comp with a Thief to clear, and I should be able to still hit the threshold. I don't know, we'd have to test. Again, this is just all about me actually, instead of just theorizing, having a practical example of how long the run should take. And I mean, even better news is all this indicates that the run is actually really feasible. It's just about meeting the thresholds for both HP to survive and obviously damage to clear. The other few ones I have here. So this is the worst case scenario, I'm going to say. So for instance, say I can do up to Dimension 9 with Magic Clock, which means that I clear Dimension 2 in 2 runs. So 1 without the clock, 1 with the clock, and then every dimension up to that takes me 2. That means that by the time I get to Dimension 10, I'm out of the clock. So there is 1,000 floors for me to clear on Dimension 10. So if I were to sort of plan around this structure, the initial run would take me, between 4 hours to 3 hours. And then if we account for the extra segment, the floor 1000, it's still looking pretty good. I mean, all in all, this is probably my previous estimate of it taking about 6 hours, which again is a really good indication that the run is feasible. And one, I don't have to really pressure myself to try and keep the Magic Clock, because this is a pretty good estimate that I can actually clear the final segment or the final hurdle without the Magic Clock in a reasonable time to still make the run work. Like if I can get Dimension 10 in 8 hours, even if I don't have the Magic Clock, I should be able to scrape by and clear it, which is actually really good because it means I can actually grind on the back end as well. So say I have 6 hours of grinding available. I get up to Dimension 9. I then can grind however much time is left between the difference between these two segments. So just imagine the segment's done. I need to allot 2 hours to clear Dimension 10. So any time under 8 hours, if I reach Dimension 9, I can now use that to gather, say, more essence, levels, complete quests, do all these different things to actually meet this threshold. So that's really, really good to know. And it means I'm pretty confident with the run. And I would say I'm almost better off just completing runs at this point rather than trying to really grind out the early game, whichever segments I think I'm having difficulty with, because I do have a far bigger buffer than what I realized. And just to quickly go over the values, because obviously they're sort of janky numbers. So this is You know what? It's probably easier if I convert them all to minutes. That's probably the easier way to sort of look at it. Because like 4 point blah 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 in hours is a bit difficult. So 250 minutes. So that's 4 hours and 11 minutes. To 4 hours and what is that? 37 minutes, so 4 hours 40 minutes. Still, you know, it's a reasonable time if I want to swap to nailed it on, say, dimension 6. And that way I can cap out the damage. Even if I have to do that, as long as I'm still meeting the damage threshold, I'm perfectly fine. In fact, if I can open it up, right? So I've got my Carpenter and Mystic brackets here. So this is the max HP of a enemy in Dimension 10, 777. So as long as I can get the Carpenters to 777 damage, or if you divide it by 4, because that's how much nailed it does. Is that this? No, it's divided by 3. You know what? I can just fix that though. So if I can get the Carpenters to a base of around 200 damage, I can easily clear the whole run. And that's not impossible. Well, I guess it kind of is. Because if we look at this, for instance, to get 100 buff off the attack relic, the relic would need to be level 50, and that would cost over 4,000 essence. So it is a bit unfeasible, actually, to go down that route. It is easier if I say divided by 6, because that's the Torment bracket. So this means that each Mystic only has to do 130 damage through Torment to clear effectively. Well, actually, no, because I'm only using 4, right? Anyway, all in all this proof shows is that the run is a lot more feasible than what I was thinking, and I already thought it was doable, it'd just be a long grind. It just means that I can comfortably push through a lot better. I don't have to worry too much about wasting time, because another thing that really sort of tripped me up is I wasn't getting into my head that it's a curve, so the later dimensions will take longer. I just got into this bad mentality of each dimension wanting to clear in, say, under an hour, which is not feasible because the later dimensions obviously have more flaws, so they're going to take longer. All in all, it's really good to know. Glad I sat down and done this. I hope you learned something or found it interesting. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I guess back to normal runs next week.